This tiny computer packs a punch. It was designed to be a home lab you can fit in your pocket, and with 10 gigabits a second of networking spread across 4 ports, it might just be a contender for your next router. Welcome back to the Pro Tech Show. The device I have today is the iKOOLCORE R1, and it is ridiculously small considering what it manages to pack inside. They sent this over for review, and as with any review in this channel, there was no payment involved, and no obligation on my part to even make a video, let alone say nice things about it, because that would be a sponsorship, not a review. To give you a sense of scale, here are a couple of laptops, the R1 and the internet standard unit of measurement. By the way, it outperforms all of these, even the banana. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, let's take a look at the hardware before we talk about performance. And software. We need to talk about the software. On the front we have 2 USB 3 Type A ports and a power button. On the side we have a USB Type C port and a micro SD card slot. Booting from SD card is an option here. On the back we see its real talking point, 4 2.5 gig network ports. That's a lot of connectivity for a device this size. There's a full-size HDMI port for a TV or monitor, and a port for power. Note I said power and not USB. It looks like a USB-C port and has the letters PD next to it, which may lead you to assume it's powered using the USB power delivery standard. That's half right. The R1 can indeed be powered using USB PD. However, the power adapter that comes in the box is not USB PD. I'm making a point of this because I think iKOOLCORE could be a bit clearer about it. The R1 accepts USB PD. Its power adapter has a USB-C connector, but the USB PD standard requires some back and forth communication between the power supply and the device to negotiate power requirements, and the included adapter doesn't do that, it just spurts out 12 volts. Take a standard AC adapter, cut off the barrel connector, solder on a USB-C connector instead, and that's pretty much what you've got here. The R1 doesn't care, it'll take raw voltage or it will talk USB PD. If you connect the power supply to the wrong USB port by mistake, it won't power up, but it has hardware protection to ensure it won't be damaged either. The same cannot necessarily be said for other devices. If you were to plug something else into this power supply that's expecting USB, bad things could happen. Don't try to charge your phone off it. A nice touch is they included a barrel jack to USB-C adapter in the box. This doesn't make it USB PD compatible, it's still just 12 volts. But it does mean you don't have to use their power supply. If it breaks or you lose it, a regular barrel connector can be used. They also sell a power brick with a bunch of barrel connectors coming out of it, so if you had a bunch of R1s, you could build a little cluster of them running off a single power supply. That's it for external connectivity, let's have a look inside. There are multiple configuration options. This device has the Intel Celeron N5105, there's also an upgraded processor available in the form of the Pentium Silver N6005. Memory options come in 8 or 16 gig, and you can get it with a 128 gig or 512 gig hard drive or none at all. Speaking of the hard drive, it's a standard 42mm M.2 drive, and it is upgradable up to 2 TB, which I think is a current limitation of the drive's form factor rather than of the R1 itself. If you need more space, they did also send over this USB-C M.2 enclosure that you can buy as an accessory. It apparently supports up to 10 gigabits per second of transfer. I guess that's what they expect the USB-C data port to be used for. It's really easy to get to the internal NVMe drive. The top here just pops off and the drive is accessible through this cutout. The lid doubles as a heatsink with a thermal pad making contact here. It also came with an alternative plastic lid in the box. Apparently that's an older design and it's still used on the other NUC model because a fully metal case interferes with its wireless connectivity. The R1 doesn't have wireless, focusing instead on its 10 gigs of wired networking. So they've upgraded the lid to milled aluminium, and that's now shipping as standard for better cooling. It seems to be working because you can feel it getting quite warm under load. Once the lid is off, you can remove these 4 screws and the rest of the chassis slides off to give you a look at the internals. The components are arranged across 2 stacked boards. Most are soldered in place because of its diminutive size. It's not like you can fit a regular stick of RAM in it. You can easily enough replace the SSD, the BIOS battery and the cooler. They sell a replacement for that, so at least you're not stuck if the fan dies. But how does it perform? The size of this thing and its focus on HomeLabs invites comparisons with the Zima board I reviewed recently, so I'm going to put it through the same tests. I'll run Cinebench to assess its performance and measure the power consumed in the process, then divide the two to arrive at an efficiency score. With small form factors like this, the emphasis is more on efficiency than raw performance. You don't buy a Celeron for performance, You buy it for low running costs, especially in a home lab that's likely to be powered 24/7. As before, I've included scores for my desktop and my laptop for context. The desktop is there as a bigger picture thing. The laptop and the Zima board are the real points of comparison, because like the R1, they are both designed for low power consumption. In Cinebench, the R1 outperforms both the laptop and the Zima board, managing more than double the performance of its passively cooled HomeLab competitor. Both the laptop and the Zima board are using old processors from late 2016. The laptop because, well, it's old, and the Zima board as a design choice. One of the questions I posed about the Zima board was how well performance and efficiency might benefit from a more modern architecture. And the R1's processor from early 2021 shows what 4.5 years can do, as a newer Celeron outperforms the older i5 in my laptop. Now let's take a look at power efficiency, and this is a bit of a mixed bag. Idle power consumption was around 11 watts, which is 3 times what the laptop and the Zima board suck down, and more than the Zima board consumed under load. Under load is where the R1 shines though, as it consumes less power than the same laptop it already beat in Cinebench. In fact, not only is the R1 the highest performing out of our low power devices, it also scores the best efficiency under load. Achieving both the highest outright performance and the highest performance per watt would be quite the win if it weren't for its idle power consumption. Comparing the R1 with the Zima board, which is better really comes down to your use case. The Zima board is incredibly flexible due to its external SATA and PCI Express ports. Basically, it's a platform to build things with using additional hardware. The R1 by comparison is more complete as is and more focused. You can attach a SATA card to the Zima board and hook up 7 different hard drives to build a NAS, or you could attach a VOD port 2.5 gig network card instead and build a router. You can't plug random PCI Express cards into the R1 to turn it into a NAS, but if you want a router, it doesn't need to be adapted, it was built for this, and it does it without hanging PCI Express cards off the side. So if you're comparing the two, consider whether you desire more adaptability and lower power, or more focus and more performance. Another consideration is that the Zima board, being passively cooled, is completely silent, whereas the R1 is actively cooled, allowing it to reach higher performance in a smaller package at the cost of some noise. Since its initial release, the R1's cooling solution has been upgraded to be quieter, but it's definitely not silent, and the fan seems to be running all of the time. It doesn't really bother me personally, but noise is a very subjective thing. There are far too many variables between my microphone and your speakers to give you an accurate sense of volume by itself, so I'm going to pit it against a couple of laptops I have to hand so you can assess it comparatively. One thing I have noticed is that if I put the R1 on a hard surface, it can resonate, and that resonant frequency is quite distracting. I think this could be solved by putting rubber feet in the bottom, and that would also improve airflow to the downward facing intake. Something for the R2 perhaps? Here are the comparisons, you might want headphones. That's the hardware covered. Now, what can you actually run in this thing? If you get one of these with the hard drive pre-installed, then the very first thing you need to do is wipe it. That probably sounds ominous. It is. More later. I tried a mixture of Windows, Linux, BSD and virtualization on this. Fedora, Ubuntu and Rocky Linux all installed fine and just worked, as did TrueNAS Core. Proxmox is what came pre-installed, so clearly that works. And I was even able to install VMware ESXi 8 with no trouble at all. I even installed it on a microSD card to test if it would be bootable, and it was fine, although VMware don't recommend using SD cards as a boot drive anymore. This is in large part thanks to its Intel networking. One of the points for improvement I noted about the Zima board was its use of Realtek rather than Intel. Realtek is cheaper and often used in consumer grade equipment as a result. Intel has a better reputation for performance and reliability. For consumer kit, honestly, Realtek is fine. It's never been a problem for me unless I try to do something a little less home usery, like install VMware ESXi. Intel is a bigger play in the server market, where reliability and performance are worth paying a premium for, and typically has better driver support for server applications as a result. This is a definite advantage for the R1 in a HomeLab capacity, but unfortunately the Intel i226V it uses is not without its problems. I haven't encountered any issues myself, but it has been reported to suffer from unplanned disconnections. Intel are aware of the problem, and I think the latest drivers are supposed to resolve it. Maybe that's why I didn't have any problems, or maybe I just got lucky. There is also an official workaround by disabling the energy efficient Ethernet mode in the advanced driver settings in either Windows or Linux. Where I did encounter a problem with the Intel NIC was pfSense. The current version of pfSense, 2.6, doesn't support it, so that was a bust. OpenSense, on the other hand, worked just fine. The number of ports this thing has, using it as a router seems like an obvious fit. I've heard that pfSense 2.7 should add driver support, but the dev build I downloaded wouldn't even boot without crashing. Surprisingly, Windows also failed to support the Intel NIC out of the box. In most cases this wouldn't be an issue, the drivers are readily available online. It means you'll need to load the drivers onto a USB drive first. Beyond that, Windows 11 was spot on. It has secure boot, it has a TPM, and the processor is fully supported, so no kludge is required to run Windows. In fact, it ran much better on the R1 than it does on my laptop. There are a few Intel drivers that won't be installed automatically, so I'll make a note of what you need in the video description for you. iKOOLCORE's wiki does have a section where you can download the drivers, but I'm going to recommend you don't do that, and instead grab them from Intel directly. iKOOLCORE is a small company, and they're obviously trying to keep costs low, because the drivers are hosted in a personal Google Drive. Now I did spot check a couple, I downloaded theirs and the official copy directly from Intel, ran the hashes, and they matched, so I'm not suggesting foul play. For me though, this is not a good way to maintain a secure supply chain. If that Google Drive got compromised, it would be bad news for their customers. My recommendation is simple. If you're a customer, get the drivers from Intel directly. If you work at iKOOLCORE, don't even bother to host your own copy, just link the official downloads at Intel. Keep it simple, avoid the hosting costs, and avoid any concerns about security. While we're on the topic of things that look a little sketchy, let's talk about the pre-installed software. Mine came running Proxmox with some virtual machines and containers already deployed. That in itself is okay, assuming they're correctly licensed. They weren't. One of the virtual machines was running Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC. If you're not familiar with the Enterprise edition of Windows, that's because it's not sold to consumers. It is only sold to businesses under volume licensing agreements. You shouldn't be able to buy it, and there is no standalone version of it. It only exists as a volume licensed upgrade that you apply to an already licensed Pro Edition machine. There is no legitimate reason I can think of for this to have been included. Furthermore, Proxmox was also running a copy of OpenWRT. That's fine, it's open source. The R1 has lots of network ports, so this seems like a natural pairing. But OpenWRT had a third-party KMS server installed. A KMS server is a Microsoft tool used by businesses to automatically activate Microsoft products within their network. The third-party one replicates the same behaviour, but doesn't require you to register it with Microsoft, which means you can activate products you haven't purchased, and Microsoft will never know. There can be legitimate uses for this, but they're not usually why people install it, and taken alongside the suspicious copy of Windows, this doesn't look good. I contacted iKOOLCORE, and their explanation was that this was an accident and wasn't supposed to be shipped outside of China. International units should come with a vanilla installation of Proxmox and nothing else. That may be true because most of it was in Chinese and I can't read Chinese, so it doesn't make sense to ship it to me. The explanation isn't good enough though. Perhaps they didn't mean to send this to me, but they did mean to create it. The other problem with this explanation is that their wiki has instructions in English for how to download new copies of the included software, and they have links to both Chinese and English versions of Windows 10 Enterprise. How do you download Windows 10 Enterprise, you might ask? It's an eDonkey link. eDonkey was how people used to do piracy back in the days when the internet sounded like this. I had no idea it was still going. Look, if you buy one of these, either buy it without a hard drive or wipe it as soon as it arrives because it could get you in trouble. Now, assuming you've done that, what are some of the things you might use an R1 for? Without looking too far, there are some obvious hints. That number of 2.5 gig Ethernet ports means it's practically begging to be a router. As OpenSense installed without a hitch, that's a good use right there. It comes running Proxmox, it works with VMware ESXi, and with 16 gigs of memory you can fit a handful of virtual machines on there. There's enough network connectivity that you could have a small boot drive and dedicate a couple of ports to iSCSI, then run a little cluster of them. They also include a VESA mount in the box, so you can mount this to the back of a monitor as a compact desktop PC. That's a nice value add, but I don't think it plays to R1's strengths. This is insanely small. That and its networking are the big talking points. You don't need all of these ports on a desktop, and it wouldn't need to be this small to hide it behind a monitor. A device this size has to make a few compromises due to its size, like non-upgradable memory. You could hide something much bigger behind a monitor if that's your goal. At the end of the day, if it's hidden, it's hidden. It wouldn't need to be this tiny, so stuffing it behind a monitor, whilst useful, feels like it's wasting the R1's potential. For me, the three standout reasons to use this are as a next-gen firewall and router, a beginner's virtualization platform, or as a portable lab. Now the last one deserves a bit of an explanation. Why would you need a portable lab when the internet exists? In a word, reliability. I have sat through many a vendor presentation in my career. Part of my position as decision maker within a consultancy is that if anyone successfully pitches me a product, it's not just me who's going to buy it. Realistically, if they do a good job, they're going to get sales at a bunch of other companies as well based on my recommendation. So you can imagine I get pitched fairly often, and on the rare occasion something looks genuinely interesting, I'll want to see a demo. You know what they say about live demos. Honestly, it's amazing how often these things fall over because of wireless issues, server problems, the VPN being down, you name it. If I was in that technical sales role, I'd be loading this up with a demo platform and chucking it in my bag in case Cloudland failed me. That's an obscure use case, but with the right person, I think that's a good one. Now the big question, does this get my recommendation? There's a lot to like about it. It's a very tidy bit of kit, and it's good to see that iKOOLCORE have made a few updates since the initial release based on user feedback. The impression I got in my communication with them is that they're genuinely passionate about making a good product. There's definitely potential here, but right now I can't give it my recommendation because of the software. That needs to be resolved. They're a small company trying to get off the ground, and it smacks of immaturity rather than malice. Unlicensed software, an unfinished wiki, rude words in an article URL, eDonkey links, using a personal Google Drive to distribute software. It's not a professional picture, and if iKOOLCORE wants to achieve more success internationally, it needs to be cleaned up. Right now, I could format this drive and use it at home without any great concern, but if I brought this to use at work, an auditor would have my balls. That's a shame to end on that note, but it is fixable. The next move belongs to iKOOLCORE. Let's see what they do.